Good morning and welcome to the weekly review live on Teachers Talk Radio this Sunday morning. Joining me to review the week in education, we have Nathan Ginn, we have Brent Poland, and we have our first time reviewer. You will have heard her on every Teachers Talk Radio show, reading the news, but she's now here to review the news. It is Joe Fox. But there's only one place we can really start on Teachers Talk Radio today. I live and I work in Nottingham, and this was a news that affected me quite tragically, but also the Nottingham community, and that was the murder of Ian Coates, Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar in the early hours of Tuesday this week. A city and a community is in mourning. Ian was the site manager of Huntington Primary School. At Teachers Talk Radio, we know just how important site managers and caretakers are to schools. Without them, there is no school, no education, and no learning. The school's executive head teacher, Ross Middleton, described Ian as a much-loved colleague who always went the extra mile for the benefit of their children and will be greatly missed. Barnaby and Grace were students at the University of Nottingham. Barnaby was studying history and Grace medicine. Like Ian, their murder has provoked a deep sense of anguish in this city. University was the time of their life. Barnaby played cricket and Grace hockey for the England under-18s. And as well as their families who will be mourning, we know that Barnaby and Grace's former teachers who educated them in Somerset and London respectively will be grieving at the loss of two young people whose incredibly bright futures now tragically extinguished they helped to shape. Teachers Talk Radio has hosts from the university sector, whether working in teacher education or education research, and we know that these murders would have affected those working in universities as well. Our thoughts at Teachers Talk Radio are with the families, friends and colleagues of Ian, Barnaby and Grace. The stories that we're going to focus on today are as follows. Our first story is a breaking news story from yesterday, which is that teachers in England will strike over pay again on 2 dates in July. Our second story is about the King's Birthday Honours List. 48 educationalists have been honoured, but just one is a classroom teacher. And then we'll end today with news from Scotland about potentially scrapping exams for 15 and 16-year-olds. Our first story: teachers in England will strike over pay again on 2 dates in July, according to the NEU. National strikes are scheduled for Wednesday the 5th of July and Friday the 7th of July. Many schools are likely to fully or partially close. The NEU is calling for negotiations with the government to start again and says strike action is a last resort. But Education Secretary Gillian Keegan has said that strike action is extremely disappointing. On the 2nd of May, the most recent strike, more schools than ever were closed. Just 45% of schools were fully open. We better go to Teachers Talk Radio's representative from the NEU, Brent Poland, for this. Obviously, the government's refusing to publish STRB, and so the NEU has been forced into this action. Is it a case of bad timing, though, especially with the other free trade unions balloting for strike action? Does this just feel as if the NEU's jumped the gun a little bit?
Yeah, can I add as well? Thank you, Tom. Living in the Nottingham area, being an alumni of Nottingham University, that's well said. And it's been hard the last couple of days. Some of my colleagues were affected by what happened, and thoughts and prayers with the family. There is a bit of discourse at the moment where it feels like a strike has been squeezed in just by the end of the year, and we're all fatigued, we're all tired, and certainly there is a little bit of do we really have to do this? But at the same time, the union's working hard to convince people that we have no other option. As I keep saying to people, what are our options here? This is the anniversary of the Orgreave. Do we take to the streets and do a 1970s and 1980s? Do we escalate? We're trying to do what we can within the law as a union to scream out to the general public, to scream out to the government that there is a crisis in education. And there is a crisis in education. And it's the government's response, which is pretty much to gaslight us. And even worse than that, to come out with a statement like, yes, there's money in the budget. That's just absolutely winding us up. So I squarely put the blame at this, not with the unions. I put it squarely the blame of the government, who haven't sat down and negotiated. I believe you're right. I think the unions have no other choice, just basically to say, look, we haven't gone away. We are going to go on strike. I know it's not going to be popular with some people, but at the end of the day, what are our choices? What are we to do? The government's not responding, they're not negotiating, they're not talking. And they're not even publishing the evidence. They're holding back the evidence. The last thing I'll say on this is quite simply, I'm frustrated. I'm angry. I don't want to go on strike. I don't want to lose 2 days' pay. I don't want to go to my staff room to my colleagues and some of them saying, "Look, I've lost 5 days' strike." I'd like the head teachers union and NASUWT and the whole teaching profession to join us. But that's where we're at the moment, and that's where it's going to be at. And I think, unfortunately, unless there is a change in the government's rhetoric, I don't see there a different course of action. No other choice.
No other choice. Nathan, I've seen a lot of teachers, mainly senior leaders, but teachers as well, on Twitter saying this strike action is misguided, it's bad timing, it's going to affect sports days, it's going to affect transition days in particular, and it's actually going to get in the way, not only in the short term, but also going to have a long-term impact. Are they justified to have that stance?
I don't think it's great timing, I have to say, but when is a good time for a strike? From my point of view, they're supposed to be disruptive. They are supposed to be disruptive. I don't think now is the best time in the year to be disruptive. And the things that you're talking about there, that people are complaining about, a sports day you can move. And we've got bigger problems than a sports day. Transition days. All of this stuff is stuff we can work around, and actually probably easier than staff sickness to rearrange for a strike, because at least we know it's happening in advance. My issue with it, is that it's not a great time of year for us to still be dragging this out in England. As I say, we sorted it out here in Wales a while ago now, at least a few strikes ago. And that for me says that this isn't necessarily a financial issue. This isn't necessary. This is a political issue that they're battling now. It's a choice, because we're not doing that here in Wales. We've come to an agreement, and it might not have been a great agreement, whether you agree with it or not, but we come to an agreement, so we're not striking. They haven't in England, and that is down to a political choice for me. And so, yeah, it's not a matter of schools. It's a matter of politics, unfortunately, for me.
Mm-hmm. Now, Joe, you've reported on these strikes a number of times, and you've reported on the NEU and Gillian Keegan. You must be fed up of saying the words to an extent. We know from members of the NEU executive that there was debate and there was disagreement about this strike action. We know that even though, of course, the NEU executive is going to be supporting this, we know that there was disagreement from some members. We don't know who. Do we think these strikes will make a difference?
I'm not sure that the timing is as good as it could be, and I think that the RSC strike action is something that I was brought up to always support. My dad was a union convener in the industry that he worked in, and I've always passionately defended everybody's right to strike. But I do think that the timing of these strikes are presenting some union members and some professionals with a very real moral dilemma in terms of what it means for the young people that they serve. And I think that this is a real battle between heart and head for an awful lot of educationalists across the UK. A lot of the time, particularly in England at the moment, as we say, unions have negotiated more successfully in other parts of the four home nations, but Gillian Keegan appears to be unwilling to shift her position that we need to wait for the peer review body to make its announcement. And I just think that it's a real head and heart battle for this particular set of action dates, because young people are always at the heart of everything that we do. But realistically, government know that. They take advantage of that. And they also present us in a real difficult position with mainstream media. We will be the enemies in some parts of the press over the next few weeks if these strike dates go ahead. Unfortunately, I can't see anything changing in the government's position in time to avert them.
No, this is going to be Mary and Kevin's last strike as Joint General Secretaries of the NEU, of course, because the NEU is, of course, balancing for a renewed mandate starting in September when Daniel Kebede takes over. Nathan, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I just wanted to say on that, with the timing of this as well, and with what Joe says about us being public enemy number one in the newspapers, I would say to any teachers out there, don't be caught sunbathing in the park on a strike day. it will be on the front page of the horrible newspaper tabloids. And I guarantee that's the way we're heading it. And I have to speak to young people, remember post-pandemic when we hadn't had a strike for a while, about what this gets like when we do take industrial action with the national newspapers sometimes. And it is a horrible situation to be in, to know that, you know, you will be thought badly of, even if you are not working that day because you're on strike, because of the actions you take in public. And I think that's a real danger for us.
Nathan, teachers should be allowed to do. I appreciate the points about the national media here, and that there are some newspapers and some outlets who are going to be anti-teacher no matter what we do. But if teachers are on strike, the one thing they shouldn't be doing is working. They should be able to do, and they should be able to do anything else they like, including sunbathing in the park or going to a beach or something like that. Nathan.
Oh, they should be, but the public perception and the media's manipulation of that perception will be damning. You know, if it happens, when you know it always is. It always is, and it is down to pitching these battles of us v them. And it really shouldn't be that way. We are all working people, and we're all looking after and educating a generation. It shouldn't be about us v them. No one's making it that, apart from the political spectrum on it. And that's the bit that I disagree with. But as I say, it would be stupid of us not to think that that's going to happen. I put money on it.
Thank you for that, Nathan. We do need to move on, but before we move on to our next story, it's a very good reminder to tell you that this show is brought to you in association with Pearson Edexcel. Their new student-centered French, German and Spanish 2024 GCSEs cater to the needs of all learners, regardless of their background, ability or reason for studying. Rooted in learned language knowledge, their assessments are transparent and accessible, allowing all students to showcase their language skills through inclusive and relatable content. The new Pearson MFL GCSEs build a shared cultural capital that helps students to develop an understanding of and appreciation for the wider world. If you want to find out more, why wouldn't you? Let's go to go.pearson.com/MFL. It's time to move on to our second story of the day. 48 people with links to England's school system have received gongs for their services to education. 5 CBEs, 13 OBEs, 26 MBEs and 4 BEMs. They include Academy Trust chief executives, school head teachers and governors. They include Mark Ducker, former boss of Step Academy Trust, Judith Reagan, former head of Queensmill School in Hammersmith, and Nigel Genders, chief executive officer at the Church of England. Simon Liebers, who was best known for messing up Ofqual's exams back in the summer of COVID, will also receive a CBE. However, there is just one school classroom teacher who has been honoured. There have been 2 civil servants, 2 for deputies or assistant heads, 14 trust chief execs and executive heads have been honoured, 7 head teachers, and 15 for those in the third and charity sectors. So my question is, should we have more classroom-based teachers, those who decide not to go into leadership but decide to serve the children in the classroom for 21, 22 hours a week? Should more of these people be honoured? I want to start with Joe on this one.
I think with all things to do with the honours lists, and the honours lists have been in the news a little bit too much the last couple of days as well, with regard to Boris and also Liz Truss's ill-advised perhaps lists of honours. I think they're always going to be a tricky thing. It's easy for us to give honours to those people who are naturally at a higher profile, and those people who lead multi-academy trusts, those people who work for aspects of our education system, such as Ofqual, regardless of whether they've made mistakes or not, are easy to recognise. They are easy targets for people to push forward the education agenda. They do represent us, whether they represent us always positively, and they certainly don't represent us, however, in the same way as classroom teachers would do. But who would you pick to have a classroom teacher's honours? Who would deserve something to be recognised in a way for what I guess for some people is just doing their job? We all know how hard doing their job is. we all know what it's like to be a classroom teacher, even if we can't quite remember what it's like as much as possible. I do think that, speaking as somebody who's there's a representative of my hometown on the honours list this year. So there's Philip Cook from Stockton-on-Tees is lurking around on there. He's a military veteran, but he's also been responsible for making quite a significant impact on a number of colleges in the local area and turning a few things around. Do I think that he deserves his honour? Absolutely, I do. I went to one of the colleges that he was responsible for turning around. It was in a bit of a sticky situation a few years ago. I think he deserves his honours. Do I think that we could look at broadening out the criteria, opening up the opportunity for people to be celebrated? Absolutely, yes, I do. But I also think we've got a deeper rooted problem. I was looking at a few stats before I came on here, just on the government's own website about the honours list, actually. And I think not only is there a remarkable lack of normal people from education being included in that list of 48, but by the government's own admission on their list, only 3% of the receivers of an honour in the King's Honours list this year are from an ethnic background. So Black or minority ethnic background. There is a limited, again, percentage number of women who are receiving those honours. And as much as I might like to think that we should look at our individual sector more closely and how we can diversify and broaden out that, if we can't get the more obvious aspects of diversity in the honours lists out and about there, probably got a little bit less chance of doing it within our own sector.
Thank you for that, Jo. Nathan, if we want more classroom teachers represented in these honours lists, how do you go about doing it?
Yeah, I don't think it's just classroom teachers. You know, I think, you know, we should be seeing dinner ladies. We should be seeing site managers. You know, we should be seeing people. It's not about achieving the pinnacle of business or, you know, and I think education is shifting that way. You know, we're seeing this level of CEO above school management, you know. And actually, for me, a primary school head teacher is not, you know, it's a big business, maybe £1 million in there in a primary budget, but that's still local and it's still community. And I have no issue with that. A head teacher at a primary school is ingrained in the community. A CEO of a multi-academy trust, I think we're getting away from classrooms. We're getting into business leadership, and I don't see them as the same thing. But yeah, I would like to see, you know, the dinner lady, the school crossing patrol who's done it for 30 years. When I was younger, I remember these were the kind of people that I would see in the newspaper receiving honours of some form. And I think a whole level there has gone, whether that be, you know, at the local authority level where we need to get better at celebrating people, or maybe it's just a change in how the system works. I don't know. But yeah, let's celebrate people who don't get celebrated through their pay packet or through other kudos and reward. You know, let's take the time to celebrate them, for me.
Now, Brent, do you agree with Nathan there? I mean, clearly the people who have received the honours have contributed to the education landscape. I'm just trying to think of an example from my school. We know that one of our music teachers is retiring after 30 years of service at one school. And we know that other teachers elsewhere in the country are doing that. Should there be a place in the honours list for those who have served their communities and served their classrooms and served generations of students for so long? Should there be more done to recognise them?
How do I feel about the honours list? I'm not a big fan, to be honest with you. I don't agree with patronage. I agree with meritocracy. I don't think the honours list, as Nathan was suggesting, has become almost sycophantish and corrupted. I think it needs stripped all the way back to exactly that. The individual people, the people who during World War II stepped up and were the air raid wardens, the people who kept the lights on, the people who kept the country going during COVID. And we saw how they were treated. They were given a clap and then they weren't given any honours. So no, I'm not a big fan of the way the honours system is being just basically everything else denigrated and corrupted and defiled in many ways. And I don't think it's fair. I think there are many people out there who do such great work in communities, and they need to be recognized. So I agree with the concept of the honor system. I agree with the idea of rewarding people who go above and beyond. Because I think, acts of heroism, acts of bravery, these are the people who are always making this country a better place. And I think, patriotically speaking, these are the people who actually love their country and love their communities more. And sometimes they don't get the recognition. So if an honor system was looked at and made more fair, more meritocracy, and more honourable, make the honor system more honourable is what I would say.
Now, Brent, if you received an envelope and it said, "Congratulations, Brent, we'd like to give you an MBE," would you accept it?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't be a member of the British Empire. Second of all, I don't agree with empire. Third of all, I would hand that to the students who I've taught, the people around me, because the thing of it is you don't do things by yourself. So if somebody wanted to honour me, I would say the honour I've had is the honour of working with those young people and the honour of working with my colleagues. And that's how I would feel about that. I am the person I am because the people around me, the community around me, my school would deserve that honour. My colleagues would deserve that honour for putting up with me for so long, to be honest with you. So no, I wouldn't accept it.
Thank you for that, Brent. Before we move on to our final story of the day, it's a great time to remind you that this show is brought to you in partnership with the Happy Confident Company, who provide clinically approved, ready-to-go well-being and mental health programs to help your pupils thrive in only 10 minutes a day. At Teachers Talk Radio, we're really fortunate on Thursday next week at 7:30 p.m. on Twitter Spaces on The Late Show to hear all about the Happy Confident Company with our co-hosts Tom Rogers and Poppy Gibson. But if you can't wait until Thursday, then you need to go and visit www.happyconfident.com to find out more. It's now time to move on to our third and final story of the week. Has been a long week for many students. Their final GCSEs and A-levels would have taken place this week. But in Scotland, it may be no longer, because a radical review of school qualifications in Scotland is set to be published before the end of the month. And there is speculation that it could recommend an end to exams for fourth-year pupils, i.e. 15 and 16-year-olds, and for some qualifications. Pupils could instead be assessed on coursework and receive qualifications that recognise extracurricular activities. The interim report was published in March and said that the current exam system was no longer fit for purpose. The National Form 5 qualifications were introduced in 2013 to 14, and the review considers two distinct questions. Firstly, should there be exams for particular qualifications? And secondly, when should students sit exams for the first time? So Scotland is proposing a radically different system. Nathan, is this the right approach? You teach in Wales. You've seen how we do things in Wales. Would Scotland be advised to go down this path?
I think, I've got no issue with a radically different approach. I think there is opportunity to try different things. My concern about this is who they're saying it's for and who they're saying it will help. I work myself with young people who are struggling to engage with their education, from very tough socioeconomic backgrounds. They have all of the challenges stacked against them. And if anyone is suggesting that coursework is going to in some way help them or favour them, I'd argue it doesn't. It's not how I've seen it. I think for me, exams are fairer. And where the things that worry me about this is when they start saying, okay, yeah, exams are stressful. That is true. Okay, rote learning is bad. That is true. And there are ways we need to move away from that kind of thing. But this idea of collecting coursework, we know that favors some groups more than others, but then this extracurricular element for me, extra points for being a girl guide or doing the Duke of Edinburgh Award. This is favoring middle class and well-off affluent families and students. It's the amount of work that will have to go in for disadvantaged students to make this, to catch them up, to stop the gap growing, really worries me if this is the way to go. I think it is, if it is across the board and we're saying this is the way we want education to go, fine. But if we're suggesting that in any way this is going to remove barriers for disadvantaged children, I think it's entirely misguided.
Thank you for that, Nathan. Joe, is this a good idea?
I've featured the general review of Scottish education a number of times on the news in the last probably about 6 months, and this is part of a wider ranging review of just about every aspect of education. Speaking personally as a teacher with my classroom teacher head on, a number of things made me twitch at this. First of all, the idea of coursework we know, as Nathan's already said, has a distinct disadvantage for a large number of already disadvantaged young people. They're lacking in perhaps some support at home, lacking the general good starting points, but it also has a real negative impact on teachers. The quality of marking that needs to take place in order to make sure that children get their right deserving marks, the impact on setting high quality assessments, making sure that everything is organised and rules are followed in the right way. I remember the dark days of controlled assessment within the English system, and the additional stress and pressure that put on colleagues. I also would have quite significant concerns, and I remain in a place of blissful ignorance in a lot of ways about the new AI processes and approaches. And I see from a number of media reports that despite this suggestion of going back to coursework, there doesn't seem to be any indication as yet as to what they've considered around the use of AI and how that might impact on young people. Again, unfortunately, those who I suspect are from a more affluent, more advantaged background possibly are likely to have that bit more savvy around how to use those things to advantage themselves. Having said that, on the other side of things, there is something about recognizing stuff that doesn't happen in the classroom, that happens in broader learning, that happens in things like the Duke of Edinburgh. That does appeal to me a little bit, although I completely hear what you're saying around the fact that the vast majority of those young people who might be in the Girl Guides, who might have access to D&V and who might be able to participate in those things that do come at a cost, despite schools' best efforts in lots of ways. I still think there's something there, something in that we often talk about as educationalists, about the whole child and recognizing their development beyond just exams. But I'm not sure I know what that would confidently and clearly and fairly look like.
Interesting thoughts there, Joe. Thank you. Now, Brent, again, the NEU rep here. The NEU must be lapping this up, mustn't they? Getting rid of exams, bringing back controlled assessments. This is NEU policy, isn't it?
Yeah, big fan. The thing is, wherever doing is not working. Social mobility is at worst. Education is failing a generation of children, and the gap's getting bigger. Rogue algorithm, remember that. Terminal exams at 16. We're the only country in Western Europe to examine our children, and I'm sick of it. I am sick of seeing the mental degradation and the gauntlet I have to put these young people through at a time when their brain is being rewired. We're sticking them in an exam hall in the middle of summer and trying to destroy them by getting them to memorize content that they'll never need the rest of their life. It's absolutely ridiculous. I think it's a national disgrace the way the exam system in this country is being run. And it was proven during COVID exactly that. And it's almost like it never happened. There should have been a national conversation about why are we educating our children, for what purpose. Coursework, I believe with Joe, it's a tough gig to do control conditions. But as a geographer, coursework and me and geography go hand to hand. Can be done, has to be done in a way which is fair, has to be done in a way which doesn't disadvantage kids. Absolutely. It would have to be done in school, because there's no way you could do coursework at home now with AI. That would just be ridiculous. So we'd have to come up with systems. But that's the thing. That would need people to comply and people to buy into it. And first of all, we need the conversation. We need to sit down and look at the evidence. And I don't think education policy has been evidence-led at the moment. It's been too politically led. And that's when we need to look at what other countries are doing, how they educate. And I'm a big fan of the likes of the International Baccalaureate for the reasons that you see in the cultural capital coming in, and you want to grow and nurture children, not send them into an exam hall to study 11 terminal exams of 50 odd exam papers that last 2.5 hours where they have to memorize how much. We're overloading kids and not getting the best out of them. So our current exam system needs changing. And if it means dropping GCSEs at 16, absolutely, completely agree. Only country in Western Europe to do it. shouldn't be doing it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Brent. I think there's a really interesting story sitting there waiting for an education journalist to break. And I would, but I don't have the capacity or skills to be able to do so, about just how unreliable some of these exam grades are, particularly this year with some of the very shoddy standardisation processes that have been running by some exam boards, which in some cases have been virtually non-existent. And there's going to be a huge unreliability, I think, to some of the exam grades which are being handed out this year. And people are only going to know if they send them in for a remark. And if you've got the money to do that, you can. But if you don't have the money to do that, you can't. And as I say, I'm sure that if somebody from one of the education journalism organisations is listening to this, then very good morning to you. There's a story out there to be broken. Before we end the show, I want to go through our shows of the week this week. I'm going to start with Nathan, then Joe, then Brent, and then I will round off. So Nathan, show of the week, all yours.
Yeah, mine was Culture, Cake and Yoga. It was the Wellbe podcast. Mark Solomon's talking to Kelly Hannigan about staff wellbeing. It's a brilliant one for your drive to work next week. If you've missed it, little half an hour podcast there. You'll really benefit from listening to that one.
I'm on mute, thank you. I'm going to go to Brent next.
Yeah, I really liked the Jim Knight interview on Hannah's show on the 13th, and that was about institutional coaching, and obviously drawing some parallels to the British and American systems, and well worth a listen back to. He was absolutely fantastic, and he's got a lovely voice, very easy to listen to actually, so that one would be a very easy listen, and a couple of tidbits, especially about motivation. I love what he's talking about motivation, because I think that's massively important. So that was the Jim Knight interview with Hannah.
Thank you for that. Joe?
As ever, I end up enjoying every single show that I listen to on Teachers Talk Radio. I regularly agree with a lot of the things that are said and heard, but I particularly enjoy it when we get a little bit controversial, a little bit of a discussion and a debate going on. And I think we've got some real high quality stuff to listen to. And obviously, as always, I'm a big fan of my own news slot. And you get to hear me regularly.
And my show of the week was Nathan Ginn's on Monday. It was a week ago, but it feels much longer now, on financial education in schools. Just Finance Foundation, which offers free programs to schools to support finance education. And it was really interesting looking at financial education in the curriculum, when you should start teaching financial education, and also the work that it's doing in alternative provision too. That is the end of today's show. Thank you very much for your time, Nathan, Brent and Joe. Thank you very much to all of our listeners, and we shall see you next Sunday for the next weekly review. Until then, take care.